At the beginning and end of every psalm, you have in the Liturgy of the Hours, in most cases, a antiphon, which literally means, before the sound. So the antiphon are these bookends, most commonly, of a psalm that set the theological meaning of whatever the feast day is or whatever the point of the celebration is. And oftentimes they're what establishes a Christological meaning or a Christian meaning to these ancient Jewish poems that are the Psalms. And the antiphons are being still they're being compiled still by Solesmes under the license of the Vatican. Solesmes is a monastery. Now it's actually, there's like 30 Solesmes style monasteries around the world.
Under the congregation.
Yeah, congregations. The Solesmes is the gold standard producers, compilers, and scholars.
They're French Benedictine monks who compiled the chant.
And they have libraries full of all the manuscripts from the last 1,000 years, and there's still thousands of manuscripts that they have for the last 200 years been restoring into our modern books. And this one, for example, the Antiphonale Romanum II, was released, and this is just in Latin. This was released in 2009, Antiphonale Romanum I. This is just Vespers on feasts, solemnities, and Sundays. And then Antiphonale I, which is morning prayer lauds on feasts, solemnities, and Sundays, is 2020. So this book is the current lawful promulgation of all of the antiphons and the psalms in the Liturgy of the Hours for lauds on feast days, but it was only finished in its compilation in 2019 in order to update it to the new post-Vatican II Liturgy of the Hours. And that is a really compelling argument for Latin as well, that if you want to do things according to the most proper, the most exultant, the most precise offering of the prayer of the Church, in some cases, the only texts that are available are in Latin, since it will probably be another 20 plus years for them to release an English edition of this because it's so brand new. And I hope it's 20 years because they should do it properly and they should do it well.
Well, you yourself are compiling your own version of these in English.
What we do on Sing the Hours very frequently, some people say, why are you using complicated tunes? I'm not making up complicated tunes. I'm transcribing the notes into whatever the current, even if it's a strange translation. So I'm going to have to redo it again once they release the new English translation in a couple years. But I am compiling the notes from this that are in Latin. It's like Navairun Domine. They proclaimed the Lord's praises. I'm trying to maintain the sense of the notes. And Father rightfully expressed that there is a challenge with that English might not be as perfect a vehicle for doing Gregorian chant in terms of its accents or in terms of, I think the most significant thing about the English language in terms of a paint to paint the portrait of the art of the divine office is that it has diphthongs. So like power, like in Latin, right, it would be, what was the word, fortis?
Well, you could do virtus.
Yeah,
Or
virtus. So like
virtus,
irtus, it's very direct, plain vowel sounds, whereas in English, we diphthong everything. Vowel sounds change
content.
Based off of the consonants that shape
this.
them. And so therefore, as one reflection, for a personal reflection for why oftentimes we will, with antiphons or whatever, not transcribe them into English and just do them in Latin, is because the canvas we are dealing with in sanctifying the faithful. Truth is not the only thing that sanctifies the faithful. Beauty can also sanctify the faithful. The treasury of sacred music, which, by the way, the Catechism says, and the Second Vatican Council says, is the greatest art ever made. It says it surpasses all art. And this is literally the treasury of sacred music. This is what it's talking about, is our antiphonary tradition. So
but that's good.
Yes.
So the idea then is not, why is Latin difficult, or why do we have to do difficult Latin things on Sing the Hours? The idea is that you get to hear and join in some of the most beautiful pieces ever made, and that is a gift, and you should want that.
And
we
beauty,
want to encourage
and beauty
it.
will save the world, you know?
And so yes, Latin might be difficult and maybe you don't understand it, but if it is done well at a parish or it is done well on Sing the Hours, it becomes an opportunity to enter into the liturgy in a new way and to experience the treasure of beauty, of tradition, of music in a way that you don't get when everything is sort of easily accessible.
And when it's more difficult, it turns you into a Zacchaeus. I think a lot about Zacchaeus and how he was sanctified. He was climbing trees because he couldn't hear Christ.
Exactly.
And this is why I think it's preferable. And when I cantor 4 or 5 times a week, I always turn off the microphone. Nobody's ever complained that they couldn't hear me, but I guarantee you people are listening a little harder because I'm less just overwhelmingly loud in their poor brain space. And I think like neurologically, our senses actually get dulled when things are very loud. And in Latin, the extra effort it takes to look at the translation or think about what the words mean, or even have to say the words slower because you're less familiar with voicing them, that turns you into a seeker, which is good for your soul. Rather than just sitting there and like receiving fast food, you're now slowly working on a 4-course meal for God, and it involves more effort, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Because it takes work.
It takes work, but it's also, there's a treasure of beauty that you get to participate with and in, and let it become part of who you are. This is your culture. Just as Americans get to sing Christmas carols, and these are part of an American's tradition. So as a Catholic, you have all of this material that is yours, and it is presented to you in Latin, and you should embrace it and learn to love it and let it become part of how you praise God. And that's why it's beautiful and why it should be encouraged.
I find it frustrating not to speak ill of the Vatican. It's one of my favorite places on earth, and I understand Italian. I even once was asked to lector at a mass in the Vatican, which I refused because I ended up doing just like...
Ushering?
Ushering, yeah. But the guy said, come up and read, and I was like, no. I find it interesting in the Vatican where it's not even in Italy, it's in its own country. It's in its own country whose official language is Latin, and it's in a country where they have people from all around the world constantly. Like, I haven't been to a mass there where there wasn't at least 10 different languages probably present right there. I find it frustrating, and I hope Pope Francis watches this because it's perfectly within his power to switch this back. But I think that masses in the Vatican that are happening, daily masses, should be in Latin because that's the universal language and it's something to be proud of. But they're in Italian, which is actually one of the smaller Latin Rite languages. English is bigger than, there's more English speakers in the Latin Rite. There's more Portuguese speakers in the Latin Rite than Italian. And here we are in the Vatican, and most people can't understand the readings, which the Second Vatican Council wanted people to. Everything should be, in my opinion, in Latin in the Vatican. That if I were Pope, that's what I'd do. I'll never be Pope, obviously. I've chosen other paths. But with that note, Sing the Hours is an international podcast. We have people from, I think this month, over 44 countries listening.
Yes.
And so when people complain and say, well, you should just do everything in English, I don't know why you're switching back and forth. I think that it's missing something that is part of the very nature of Sing the Hours, is that it's a global podcast. And yes, it's primarily directed towards, because it is the mother tongue of where I come from. I'm here in Massachusetts. I would love to do Sing the Hours in Italian. Seeing as I am born into this culture, I do most of the changing prayers in English, but we are an international podcast, and that is something that is a very beautiful thing. And I even have received mail from people who listen to Sing the Hours, and it helps them learn English, which is fun. They're doing it they know the Psalms in their mother tongue, Spanish or whatever. But I'm just following my bishops who say that if there's an international gathering, which we are a virtual international gathering, then you should do the ordinary in Latin. On top of that, though, as a personal note, when I do my usual daily offices, I do them probably 75% of the time in English when I pray with my family. When there's a feast day or I'm having a party, like we had a party for
Sacred Heart.
For Sacred Heart, it was wonderful.
Oh.
And at our Sacred Heart Taco Party. It was a Meat Friday, which is awesome. We sang it according to the Antiphonale. We sang Vespers in Latin, and there were a couple people there who had never been exposed to the Liturgy of the Hours at all. I asked them afterwards. I asked one of them, what did you think of that? Was that challenging for you or difficult? And she just said that was so beautiful. And now she's, as a follow-up, now she wants to start praying the Liturgy of the Hours. It inspired in her. It touched her so deeply to hear the magnificence of these beautiful chants that even though she wasn't participating actively because she's never attempted before to speak Latin or sing it, she's now all the more hungry. Like she had her Zacchaeus moment that I want to understand more. I want to dive deeper, because most young men, when they describe meeting their wife, they describe the first meeting as being struck by beauty. Look at Song of Songs. Like falling in love is at first an encounter with beauty. And the beauty that lasts is a beauty of understanding, of intellect as it deepens. But the beauty that captivates and that converts somebody to love, that awakens the nobility of love in someone, is a beauty that is attractive, a beauty that strikes you. And in liturgy, there's a reason why several popes have talked about the historical fact of how Vespers, back when it was all in Latin and nobody could understand it, converted pagans. It converted people all over Europe to Christianity, and they were converted through the song. And it wasn't necessarily a song that all these Germanic tribes could understand, but it was a song that was so captivating and beautiful that it encourages diving off the deep end into the deep waters of a relationship with God. Part of the criticism that is often given, well, why is this in Latin, is because people want it easy. But anything worth doing is not easy. Getting in shape is not easy. Getting healthy is not easy. Learning a language is not easy. Learning mathematics is not easy. But all excellent things take effort. And it's not difficult once you get immersed in it. I've seen my little nieces and nephews sing the ordinary parts. They're like 5 years old in Latin. And to them, there's no politics about it. To them, they're not like, well, I don't understand this. They understand it because kids understand beauty. And beauty will change the world. And beauty on its own can sanctify the faithful. You can be struck with love of God by walking into a monastery, walking into a church, and hearing exultant chant done for love of God. The very music itself can sanctify. And you don't necessarily have to always have it served on a silver platter, and you might find yourself receiving similar conversion like Zacchaeus when it's not. And so my encouragement would be take a little more effort. I almost always put the translations on Sing the Hours when I sing the Magnificat or whatever, and the long road is the good road, and the long road is to continue to work on familiarizing yourself, because it is your culture, because it is your patrimony, because it is your birthright, because it is your baptismal culture, and it is beautiful.
Good.
Is that fair?
That's fair. Yes, and that ties in well to sort of the two ends of liturgy. The first is to praise God. That is the ultimate goal, and it allows you to praise God well. But then the second is to sanctify the people, and there is a beauty that can help sanctify by helping us each recognize that what we're doing is real and important. This is not just another thing that we do throughout our day. This is us giving something back to God, and that is the most important thing. And so therefore, when it is done well and beautifully, absolutely it helps sanctify, because it invites us to encounter Christ and to meet him in his church through his sacraments and in his worship.
And as a final note, in sanctification of the people, another thing that the Liturgy of the Hours is for, more than the Mass, would be an uncontroversial statement, is it's for evangelization. And if you want to sanctify the heathens, I think it shows an ignorance of history when somebody assumes, well, the best way to do that is do it in a way they can understand. We should make it as understandable and as simple as possible, dumb it down, or else they're not going to understand and they're not going to be converted. Christianity, when it was growing the fastest, when it was conquering nations, spreading throughout Europe, St. Patrick's Day, when evangelists were taking it like St. Augustine in England, there were no monolithic languages in Europe the tongues of men in Northern Europe were as varied as any other place in history. And what united them into universal conversion was not missionaries going out and doing everything as scrambling as they could in whatever vernacular language they encountered. That back then there were more rigid use of Latin, and that was a time when Christianity was as powerful in terms of its evangelism as ever. And in the new evangelism, I would argue, we need to rediscover that beauty is the way. We need to start singing again. We need to sing according to the same siren songs, spiritual siren songs that evangelists have used throughout the ages. Because it works.
It does. Good. Yesterday was the feast of St. Columkill.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
But it was on a Sunday, so we didn't
but at my old parish, it outranked a Sunday. I missed it.
That's so cool.
I know.
That's just so cool.
Yeah. Good,
Thank you
Paul.
guys for listening to our Latin chat.
Yes, and if you have other questions, send them in. We like answering simple questions with hour-long responses.
Indeed.
This is good.
It is
This
a good
is fun.
thing.
This is fun. Good. God bless.
God bless.